Is Dan Brown getting lazy? Of course not, I would never say that, but you can feel the difference between his newer books and his older ones. With that being said, let's dive into the latest addition to the Robert Langdon series, The Secret of Secrets. All I knew going in was that the story is set in Prague, and I was like, yes! One of my favorite cities, with beautiful buildings, winding streets, a rich and exciting history filled with secret societies and alchemists, among whom there's even an emperor, Rudolf II, looking for the Philosopher's Stone, a city that lies at the very center of Europe. It's gonna be awesome. And did I get the topic right? I couldn't have been more wrong. So, Langdon arrives in Prague to attend a lecture by his girlfriend, noetics scientist Catherine Solomon, about the brain, out-of-body experiences, precognition, and the human consciousness. Then, a brutal murder happens, as usual. Then, someone disappears, as usual. Then, a mysterious figure with a deranged mind is stalking them, as usual. And, as usual, because of some misunderstanding, the local police wants to catch Langdon. These are things I should call boring, but they are part of every Robert Langdon story. The setup is always predictable since the first books, so much so that it doesn't even bother me. This is the usual framework for these stories, which I would almost miss if it ever changed. And hey, if people buy it like hotcakes and it works, why change it, right? And also, the real magic of Dan Brown's novels has always been what lies beyond the predictable setup. And this is where things go a somewhat unusual way, because what I truly enjoyed back in his books like The Da Vinci Code or Angels and Demons was the stories rooted in church history, the investigation guided through works of art, and the intriguing code-breaking. In those books, it felt as if the artworks were almost characters in the story, essential parts of the plot. Here, however, they are almost completely absent. When historical or artistic references appear, they often feel like info-dumped Wikipedia snippets, interesting on their own, but rarely connected to the plot, which makes these paragraphs unnecessary and irrelevant. This was already noticeable in the last book, Origin, so it's not an isolated case, but seems to indicate a new style. Honestly, I miss the old style, because without it, this feels like just another crime thriller. I hope the next book returns to its roots. I'd love to read, for example, a Langdon story following the trail of the Ark of the Covenant or Noah's Ark. I hope we'll get more books like that, but until inspiration strikes Dan Brown in that direction, I'd honestly prefer if he let Robert Langdon rest a bit and created another character who's closer to and more at home in these new kinds of themes, or use one from his previous books. For example, Catherine Solomon could have been the main character in this book, though that would be an admission that the books really have changed. So, all in all, I liked reading it as the writing style is still top tier, but something about the story was missing. I give it 6 spiked crowns out of 10.